Welcome to You Decide. I'm your host, Errol Lewis. You have decided. Zohran Mamdani is the 111th mayor of New York City now. He soundly defeated former Governor Andrew Cuomo, as well as the Republican nominee Curtis Sliwa. At 34 years old, the mayor-elect is the youngest mayor in more than a century. He's the first Muslim ever to lead the city. He's the first candidate to win more than 1 million votes since John Lindsay did that back in 1969. So Mamdani's meteoric rise marks a fascinating new chapter in New York political history. Here with me to help break it all down, it was a long, wild, historic night. We've got Spectrum News NY1's political director Bob Hardt, who was here for the whole ride. Great to see you.
Good to be here.
I have to say something about these new mugs. This is brand new. This is a great moment in podcast history. Can we show that on the camera later?
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah, forget about city political history. Forget about all the stuff. It's all about the mug.
Let's keep our priorities straight here. But before we dive into what happened, let's hear from Zohran Mamdani himself. This is a little bit of what was going on at the Brooklyn Paramount Theater in downtown Brooklyn. It was actually on the Fort Greene side, in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, where he had his victory speech.
New York will remain a city of immigrants, a city built by immigrants, powered by immigrants, and as of tonight, led by an immigrant.
So, Bob Hardt, let's go through some of the history that got made in this election, some of which got a lot of attention, some of which got very little. As I mentioned, youngest guy in over 100 years, meaning the youngest since became
consolidation,
consolidation, meaning 1898 when we became what they used to call Greater New York, but all 5 boroughs.
There's one younger mayor, a guy, no connection to the actor, a guy named Hugh Grant, who was a Tammany mayor from the 19th century. Otherwise, it's all but Mamdani's. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. And like you said, the first Muslim mayor, it's a real historic moment to see this. But also, like, if you look at his resume, it's as light as one of these pieces of paper. 5.5 years ago, he was not even a lawmaker. He was a political activist helping other candidates. Andrew Cuomo, huge, nationally known governor, doing his daily COVID briefings. How much has the worm turned in 5.5 years that Cuomo is on the complete outs now, on the outside looking in, and Mamdani, who is no one, is now going to be mayor of the largest city in the United States. It's just unbelievable to see this. The only thing that comes close to this is Barack Obama.
Yeah, it's interesting. You think back to those COVID briefings, Mamdani at that time wouldn't even have been invited into the building, right? I mean, and now, yeah, the worm has turned. Much has been made, of course, of the fact that he is Muslim. This is, in some ways, similar to what happened in London just a few years ago. And I actually spoke with a BBC reporter. We were talking about something completely different. But I said, look, what was it like? Because when Sadiq Khan was elected in London, huge wave of threats, bigotry, bitterness, anti-Islamic sentiment expressed openly. The Conservative Party tried to sort of capitalize on it politically. And in the end, after a few years, it turned out he is not as popular as he would like to be, this mayor, but it's because, the subway's late or the subway's dirty or something.
Well, that's exactly what's going to happen here, that there's going to be a shift pretty quickly next year into, am I safe walking to school? Are those schools good? Are the potholes being filled? And his Muslim identity will, I think, become somewhat secondary. There still needs to be a moment where Mamdani proves himself to skeptical New York Jews who are really worried about if there was a Crown Heights riot that happened in 1990 where Jews were attacked for several days before the police really acted. Could that happen again? And would a Mamdani police force, would he act quickly or not? And that's the kind of moment that it doesn't have to be a riot, but I think some Jewish New Yorkers are going to be skeptical beyond just, is there trash being picked up or not?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. There's going to be that question on the table. Parallel with it, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, I mean, Mamdani has been very clear that there are accumulated grievances that are very real among Muslim New Yorkers, that they've been slighted, they've been spied upon, they've been excluded, they've been physically attacked in some cases for decades. And they're not necessarily going to forget about that. It's not like, oh, let's bygones be bygones. We have this guy now at City Hall. He's made very clear that the accumulated grievances and disrespect of the past is something that has to be abolished, excised, sort of moved out of the body politic, but not just simply forgotten as if it never happened.
I think there was a wave that continued ever since 9/11 in New York City, but also nationally as well, that a lot of Muslim Americans experienced. They talk about that. We heard it from Mamdani's own mouth about a friend of the family who experienced that bigotry. So it was always there. It was amplified by 9/11. And a lot of Muslim New Yorkers have talked about it, and that'll be the other thing to factor, as well as the immigrant experience in New York. Mamdani was not born in the United States. You and I talked about a couple of the other mayors like Abe Beame or Bill O'Dwyer, who also weren't born here. So that's not new. That's not one of the first. But he does come from the leadership position in a slightly different perspective than some other mayors.
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, look, he was born in Uganda and has never surrendered his passport. He goes back there. He sort of claims it. But I think more to the point, he's of Indian descent. And so he's the first South Asian mayor that we've had. And so this is a diaspora that a lot of New Yorkers are not familiar with. We're all sort of like learning that there are Pakistanis and Bangladeshis and Nepalese. There are people here from Sri Lanka. And they don't cluster in one neighborhood or area. They're kind of all over the city, and they have a really thriving set of cultures and neighborhoods and families that are out there, and we're all learning more about it as we go along.
And obviously, India is not a monolith. As we know, there's a lot of tensions between Muslim Indians and Hindu Indians, and that also played a small role in the mayor's race too, where Indian politics was suddenly having to be tackled by Mamdani. But the interesting thing to me was Lord's, what's the de Blasio song? Royals was de Blasio's theme song.
Yeah.
And then the Empire State of Mind from Eric Adams.
Yes.
And then a Bollywood song whose I still don't remember the title.
Doom Machala.
There you go. Thank you for saving me.
Yeah.
So that was also very interesting too. Like they each had a theme song, and that was Mamdani's, and that really stood out to me almost as much as the speech. Although the speech, I'm sure you had the same reaction as I did because you're a student of history. The first person who Mamdani mentions is Eugene V. Debs, the five-time socialist candidate for president from the early 20th century, is invoked by Mamdani.
I got a roar from the crowd.
Yes, because Eugene Debs is a patron saint of the Democratic Socialists of America, but also of the labor movement. And it was really telling to me. I sort of felt like we saw more of the real Mamdani in that speech on Victory Night than we had in his very, very cautious general election. I really felt like he was sitting on the lead. You did such a great job in that debate, pressing him on issues. Like, we didn't know till the actual election day where he stood on the housing referenda. I still don't know what his blueprint is for the leadership of the school system. A lot of people remember, you and I do, the bad old days where you had school boards elections where no one voted. Is that what Mamdani wants? I don't think he does. Does he want to appoint the school's chancellor? I think he does. But the fact that you and I still don't know means he has some. Ideally, he has some of these answered before he takes office.
Well, there are a lot of gaps to be filled in for sure on policy. In fact, he had a great conversation the morning after the election. He sat with Pat Kiernan, our colleague, and went through some of the questions that are still sort of unanswered. And Pat, I think, was exactly right. He said, look, you didn't say very much during the campaign about the Administration for Children's Services, which deals with child welfare. You didn't say very much about sanitation. You didn't say a bunch of stuff that's really, really important. And he, I think in a very good-natured way said, you're absolutely right. We're gonna have to fill in a lot of I've sketched the broad outlines of where I want to take the city. We're gonna have to fill in a lot of the particulars. One thing, by the way, that has gotten very little attention, and I didn't even realize it until election night was over, and somebody sort of called it to my attention. I think I saw it on social media. This is the first mayor we've ever had from Queens.
Yeah, I'm still like, I got to go through that. I guess that's right.
Yeah.
That is pretty wild.
There are a lot of wannabes from Queens, but
plenty
this is
of
the first one
wannabes
that actually made it.
Yeah, and not in any way, shape, or form a product of the once strong Queens machine.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that when we get to our winners and losers, right? And then, of course, there was a very powerful youth vote and youth movement that lifted him to victory. And, you know, you can make the cutoff 40 years old, you can make it 35 years old, you can make it 50 years old. He seems to have dominated quite a bit. The younger you got, the more likely you were to have voted for Mamdani.
And I think he also got people to register.
Well, over 100,000 new registrants,
Which is also the creation of an army. And you and I have talked about this on election night, but the first time I had anyone ever knocking on my door in 28 years of living in the Rockaways was a team of young volunteers from Mdani.
Mm-hmm.
So either they were from Rockaway or they trudged out, but those volunteers mattered. One of our weekend producers, Bill Goodenough, was also saying, when I was looking at how much better Mamdani did with the black vote from the primary to the general election, well, Bill said to me, well, you know, he's at black churches every single Sunday. I've always had a sign-in reporter. So you look at Southeast Queens, Mdani did very well. Look at East New York, Mdani did very well. Those were places where Andrew Cuomo thought he had a chance, and in the end, Mdani did very well with the black vote.
Listen, I'm a personal witness. During the primary season, they knocked on our door in Crown Heights 8 times, according to my wife, mostly when I wasn't here. I'm usually here. I was there for 1 or 2 of them, and I treated them like the Jehovah's Witnesses, just kind of ignore them, don't answer the door. But they kept coming back. And when you engage at that level, it shows that people are serious. And I've been there for 40 years, nothing remotely like that. As you might get one or 2 door knocks from an active campaign. 8 is unheard of. And then, you talk about church. I go to a Baptist church in Bed-Stuy, and I'm good friends with the pastor. I kind of know what's going on in the church. And I didn't realize, I was just there one Sunday, and they said, oh, yeah, Mamdani's going to be here. And sure enough, there he was. And yes, if you do that enough, you can, in fact, connect with people. And our good friend, Christina Greer, who's one of the political analysts, political science professor that we work with a lot, she has pointed out on her podcast quite a lot that black voters, I think this is true, are just very practical. That historically we've just had a lot to lose by being with the wrong candidate.
Right.
And so once you establish, and this was even true for Obama, once you establish that you can win and that this is not going to be a wasted vote, people will invest and start looking at the substance of what you're talking about.
I totally agree with you. It's a side point about Obama, but it's a great one that he had to win. People thought, oh, well, he'll win the black vote because he's black. No.
He had to win Iowa first, the whitest state in the union, before he could get the black vote.
But that also proved to black voters that this wasn't a fluke.
Right.
And I sort of felt the same way with Mamdani, was that there was a tipping point where people realized, hey, this guy could win. And they wanted to be with a winner, and I think that's what we saw.
So now, Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa, they were running different strategies. In the end, they ended up cannibalizing each other. Cuomo got the best of it, but the collapse of the Sliwa candidacy, the Republican candidate who just 4 years ago got something like 29% of the vote, I think he finished with single digits, right? 7%, 8%?
I think, yeah, exactly right. I think the Cuomo strategy largely worked, which is going to Republican voters and saying, don't throw away your vote. I'm the better anti-Mamdani candidate than Sliwa. At the last minute, President Trump weighed in. I thought there'd be more Republicans saying, forget it, I want to be with Curtis Sliwa, I want to be with a real Republican. That wasn't the case. Mm-hmm. I think roughly 2/3 of the Republicans, by my count, went with Cuomo, which is a pretty solid strategy by Cuomo. But the problem was the Democrats and independents, there weren't enough of them to go with him to get him past roughly the low 40s that he got.
So even with the surge of voters, and we passed 2 million for the first time in 56 years, more than 2 million people came out to vote, Curtis Sliwa saw his total vote go from over 300,000 just 4 years ago to just a little over 100,000 this time, meaning he lost 2/3 of the people he'd had, even with lots more people coming in.
They worked. I really thought this was a waste of time by Cuomo. People don't like to be told their vote is going to be wasted. He did very well. He was on Fox a lot. He was almost a quasi-Republican in the end. Mm-hmm. The problem is there are not enough Republican votes out there in the city, and there were plenty of Democrats who weren't going to vote for Cuomo because they didn't like what they saw by the end of his governorship when he resigned because of all those sexual harassment allegations, which I still don't think he did a great job addressing. If I say to you, well, there's women in the office, Bob, they're complaining about you. So, well, I've never been criminally charged.
Yeah. Five different district attorneys looked at it.
They're still going to walk me out of this office.
The grand jury never returns an indictment.
If 10 people complain about me in the office, I can guarantee you that I'm still going to be out of a job whether or not I'm criminally charged.
Right.
And that was a bad bar. He needed to have a kind of a Bill Clinton moment where he showed contrition, and he never did. And I think that hurt him as well.
The speech that he gave, Andrew Cuomo, his concession speech, first of all, from what we've heard, and I hope we might be wrong about this, but what we've heard from Mdani is that he never got a call from Cuomo, and it's kind of traditional. And he was gracious actually after the primary. You make a phone call and you say, congratulations, this is over, I'm not going to contest it, or whatever it may be. It's important for etiquette's sake, as well as to sort of, seal the fact that it was an honest race and that it was determined fairly. Anyway, Cuomo never made that call. More importantly, he gave a very angry speech. Here's a little bit of what that sounded and looked like.
This campaign was the right fight to wage. And I am proud of what we did and what we did together. This campaign was to contest the philosophies that are shaping the Democratic Party, the future of this city, and the future of this country.
So that was a really, really angry speech.
I said to you at the time that it was more stick than olive branch. You're supposed to be conciliatory. When Rudy Giuliani lost to Dinkins in '89, his speech, if you go back and listen to it, was a much better kind of speech. And there was even a moment with Cuomo that echoed the Giuliani in '89, where supporters were getting really riled up and Giuliani had to calm them down and Cuomo had to calm them down. The other thing that really struck me as kind of bizarre for us longtime Cuomo watchers was Cuomo comparing how he did to his father's performance in 1977 as a third-party candidate.
Yeah.
Saying he did better. By the way, true. Maybe better. We have to see with all the paper ballots. But I'm like, he's still competing with his father almost 50 years after this race. And it's kind of wild that people always thought he wanted to outdo his father as governor and that he wanted to become mayor, something his father was never able to achieve. So there is this weird family vibe that also came off during that speech as well.
Yeah, that was it was very odd. And so now we heard that concession speech. I don't want to play it. There wasn't very good sound on it. Curtis Sliwa conceded very early on.
Right.
And you could see in his eyes he was just very angry. It just didn't work out for him, and he knows what happened, which is just what we described, which is that his entire candidacy was essentially taken away from him and delivered to Andrew Cuomo, even though it wasn't enough to win. So then the speech by Mamdani, which was remarkable, he comes on after 11 o'clock, and he gives a victory speech, and I just wanted to play a couple of parts of it, and we can talk about it. He starts off, he wasn't terribly gracious toward Cuomo, right? So this was a very bitter, well, we'll explain why, but anyway, here's a little bit of what he had to say.
My friends, we have toppled a political dynasty. I wish Andrew Cuomo only the best in private life. But let tonight be the final time I utter his name.
So he's basically ushering him off the stage. And when a mayor-elect or a sitting mayor says something like, I don't want to hear that guy's name in the building, that signals not just that the candidate is persona non grata, but almost everybody who was close to them, and including some donors and some of his staff and everybody else, is like, you're going to be on the outs for the next 4 years.
Well, the other thing he's already started doing is co-opting Mario Cuomo's campaign and poetry, governor and prose. Several times now he's said that, and I think that's a real tweak to the Cuomo family as well. It's a great point by Mario Cuomo that you need to govern in prose, but I think it's a very intentional quotation of Mario, and it's a tweak to Andrew.
There's a lot of bad blood here, and I've talked about it on some other episodes or referred to it, but the level of outright racist bigotry in some of these AI generated attack ads that went out there is like nothing I've ever seen. I would not have thought that in New York anybody would try and get away with some of the outright bigotry. I mean, I'm talking about imagery from 9/11 with his face superimposed over it. Incredibly vicious, angry, bigoted stuff.
I've seen it usually about African Americans. The Harvey Gantt was running against Jesse Helms. There was an infamous ad that
Sure.
Helms did. Obviously, George Bush's Willie Horton stuff against the caucus. But I haven't seen anything. The Giuliani, I don't really recall anything quite like that against David Dinkins.
No, it wasn't ads. It was,
Right.
it was
rhetoric.
the riot where they stormed City Hall.
Right.
but
yeah, this really was, and the use of AI. I mean, I think so sometimes people would be like, Mamdani bad, Muslim, Jews, and then let's get an ad, and then they would just put it up without you need to look at this.
Yeah.
The power of AI in political advertising, when a class is taught, and it'll be taught soon, they're going to show some of these Cuomo ads because I sort of felt like they just would make them and then just send them out there and then sort of edit them on the fly, and that they had to actually pull one down because it was so offensive.
Yeah, indeed. There was a part in the speech where Mamdani talks about what's essentially his base. These are the working class is an abstraction, but he sort of describes the kind of people that he's talking about that he wants to really work for and whose hopes he wants to vindicate. Let's listen to that.
This campaign is about people like Wesley, an 1199 organizer I met outside of Elmhurst Hospital on Thursday night. A New Yorker who lives elsewhere, who commutes 2 hours each way from Pennsylvania because rent is too expensive in this city. It's about people like the woman I met on the BX 33 years ago, who said to me, I used to love New York, but now it's just where I live. And it's about people like Richard, the taxi driver I went on a 15-day hunger strike with outside of City Hall, who still has to drive his cab 7 days a week. My brother, we are in City Hall now.
And we've seen this with the work that he did on behalf of medallion taxi drivers. It's heartfelt, and he's really crafting them into a political base for the first time that I can remember.
I agree with you. There's a working class New Yorkers who have felt ignored. They felt ignored by 12 years of Bloomberg. They felt less ignored by de Blasio, and I think that a lot of them were hopeful for Eric Adams, and then Eric Adams went completely off the road into a giant field of corruption. And so, I mean, I just talked to a Pakistani security guard downstairs who's thrilled.
Oh, yeah. Well, at the elevator, right? Yeah, he went out of his way to tell me that he voted for the first time so that he could vote for Mamdani.
And I think there's a lot of working class New Yorkers who feel seen and heard. And I think that's something that you're going to see is a class-based movement in New York that you really haven't seen in a while. You saw it a little bit with de Blasio, but I think you're going to see it more.
Yeah, this was long overdue. The way that the delivery people, nurses, housekeepers, nannies get treated. They're either invisible, like a lot of our security guards, where people just walk past them. And these are people where once you talk with them, they're pulling out pictures of their kids. They're proud as hell of their kid who's about to graduate from NYU, and they want to be seen, right? I mean, that's exactly the right phrase. And so, like for every time that you or I walk past like the long line of yellow cabs who, where guys like sitting there for hours trying to make a living, and we just go about our business, Mamdani's the guy who will stop and talk to them.
Right.
And that they, once they do it, this is something I actually learned from watching David Dinkins, they never forget it, so he'll take a selfie with them, he'll ask how they're doing, he knows enough, at least a smattering of multiple languages that he can sort of talk to them in their native tongue, and it really makes a connection.
And pragmatically, what's that person doing then? They're getting in a car and they're driving around New York City and they're having people get in their car, and guess what they're doing is they're talking to some of those people and saying, hey, I just met the guy running for mayor. Yeah. He was really nice.
Yeah.
And so cab drivers are great that way too, because it's a viral political moment. I have to say though, I was talking to one small business owner in the Rockaways who had a great meeting with other business owners in the Rockaways of Mdani, but he said, listen, $30 an hour is not something that I can do. I'm going to have to actually lay people off if I have to pay everyone $30 per hour, which is the goal of Mamdani. And he said, listen, the city isn't paying everybody $30 an
That's
hour.
Right.
The city government. So there is going to be that push and pull where a well-intentioned Mamdani is going to be talking to a small business owner and that's going to be the conversation that'll be very interesting to hear next year.
Oh, just speaking about government, he made some references that were not really talked about a lot on the campaign trail, and I felt like I was hearing him for the first time in his victory speech, because, I mean, I've interviewed him a number of times. We had these long conversations. I had an hour-long conversation on stage where we talked about all kinds of stuff, and I'd never heard this before, but he actually is talking about excellence in government and actually making the government work. Listen to this.
We will cut waste from a bloated bureaucracy. We will work tirelessly to make lights shine again in the hallways of NYCHA developments where they have long flickered. Safety and justice will go hand in hand as we work with police officers to reduce crime and create a department of community safety that tackles the mental health crisis and homelessness crises head on. Excellence will become the expectation across government, not the exception.
And, you know, it strikes me at first as like, you know what? All of this other stuff, you know, public safety, freezing the rent, you know, providing grocery stores to ward off hunger, that's nothing compared with trying to make the New York City bureaucracy actually function.
And to make City Hall function. I remember that the first couple months of the Bill de Blasio administration being sort of chaotic in City Hall, even us trying to get a guest to come on and talk about things, it wasn't organized. And that really became a real problem for de Blasio that he never really caught. Like, he should have had a honeymoon of a couple months. And the same thing goes with Mamdani, if he's smart. He had his first press conference the day after the election and announced his transition team. And there's 5 really capable women, including Maria Torres Springer and Lena Khan, who ran the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, for Joe Biden. And it's great to have 5 really smart people there with that great resume, but you almost need the office organizer who might not know that much about policy, who may not know that much about politics, but is like, I have a chief of staff. You are going to be reporting. It's going to go through that person. You need a chain of command, because if it's this amorphous blob for the next 57 days, it's going to be a problem on January 2nd. So that's going to be, I think, the biggest challenge for Mamdani is, it's great. You know, you had a small office as an assemblyman, a tiny office. Now you're going to have a huge office. You need to have like a Donald Rumsfeld or the Democratic equivalent of someone organizing everything.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how this gets done. Maria Torres Springer, who you mentioned, had served as first deputy mayor. So believe me, she understands chain of command.
Right.
They have an executive director who's supposed to be quarterbacking this, or at least managing a lot of it. You have Lena Khan, who, by the way, was a guest here on the podcast. You can go back and look and listen to our conversation. She was sitting right there. We had a great talk. There are some very, very capable people who have been through this before. We understand that he's also talking with Dean Foulahan, who's an old hand from prior administrations and had spent a lot of time working in Albany, so actually understands state government as well.
Patrick Gaspard,
the former White House political director under Obama, who's no slouch when it comes to these things. So yeah, he's you know, look, there's an interesting phenomenon here, and we went through some of this because we last year had our 3-part series about John Lindsay, and the parallels really are very apt.
Could not agree more.
In 1965, John Lindsay comes in. He's a Republican in a very Democratic town. He comes in by saying, we're getting rid of the old, we're bringing in something new. He brings in all of these young people in their 20s, people in their 30s with very thin resumes, and, you know, probably a little more confidence than they needed, if you want to put it that way. And they just started making stuff work. And it was chaotic and it was frantic. And there were a lot of people who thought that these kids didn't know what they were doing, but they brought us the 911 system, the first in the country. They got the subways air conditioned. They did a lot of really interesting, innovative things because they didn't have to unlearn anything. They didn't care enough about the old patronage arrangements to try and preserve them. They just scrapped them and reorganized the government.
Yeah, there are so many parallels, and it is sort of ironic that Mamdani is the first person since Lindsay to get 1 million votes. I think some of the, I don't want to get this too much about Lindsay, but I do think some of the national headwinds really hurt the Lindsay administration. And that's the other thing is, we haven't talked about Trump, that Donald Trump's relationship with the city, which is so complicated because he does love the city, but he doesn't love Mamdani, is going to be fascinating to watch. Does he send in the tanks? I'm barely exaggerating. On day 3, does he play a game of political cat and mouse with him? I just don't know. I think Trump realizes that Mamdani is really riding a huge wave. So I'm very, very curious to see how Trump approaches it. Nationally, it's a great thing to attack Mamdani politically, at least with the Republican base.
Or so they think.
Or so they think, right.
Yeah.
So they think. But I'm very curious how will this play with Donald Trump's New York. And that's going to be really interesting to watch in January and February.
Yeah, but, Republicans have been jumping up and down with glee saying, oh, now we've got this Democratic Socialist. We can use it to scare the bejesus out of voters from here to California, and we're going to win a bunch of seats in the midterm. And I'm thinking, not so fast, guys. I mean, you start talking to people, there are a fair number, and we can actually find them on the map in New York, of what were Trump Mamdani voters.
Yes.
That if you are at your wit's end and you're done with the status quo, you might end up with Trump, but you might end up with a Mamdani.
And I think, who was it on 60 Minutes who interviewed Trump? I think even she or someone raised that to the president, is there are some similarities. Really smart, easy messaging, unique.
Sure.
It's not like suddenly Trump's playbook can be given to Marco Rubio, and Marco Rubio is going to succeed with it. The same thing with Mamdani. I would tell Democrats, let's not universalize his experience. You were talking about this inside City Hall when you interviewed him when he won his assembly primary, and he's saying, it's because of all my stances. You're like, well, it's also because you're a really likable.
You're a very good politician.
You're a very good politician.
Very likable guy, right?
And so the Mamdani playbook isn't necessarily something you can hand to someone else. But I agree with you. Typically, if you and I are living in Iowa and we're not sure about the House of Representatives and who we're sending to Washington, it's not going to be about Mamdani. And I think that's something that the Republicans really have to worry about with the margins of victory in Virginia and New Jersey in those governor's races. I think that I hate it when people are like, it's a bellwether. But in this case, I think there was a little bit of that based on those numbers that we saw in Virginia and New Jersey.
Look, there's a backlash to Trump that is, Susan Kang was our guest just last week, and she's been with the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, for a long, long time. Met Mamdani years ago when he was just a field organizer with the DSA. And what she says is that, if Trump had not won, she's not entirely clear that Mamdani would have had a viable candidacy.
I think that's a great point.
A lot of what's powering him are, because look, we talked about the story of immigrants on the rise, the South Asian community. Okay, that was probably going to happen eventually. Muslims, there's close to 1 million of them here in the city. They've been organizing for over 10 years. Something was going to happen there too. But when it comes to people who are disaffected enough just in their ordinary lives, who aren't necessarily politically active, who want to get off the couch because they don't like what they're seeing happening in the country, Trump is your best organizer.
Right.
And he brought a lot of people. He got them off the couch, outdoors, holding clipboards and knocking on doors for Mamdani.
And that's a preview of what Kathy Hochul's thinking about next year when she's up for re-election, that if Kamala Harris were president, it would be a different political situation for the governor. And I think this is very helpful. And the likely Republican nominee, Lee Stefanik, is viewed by many as a handmaiden to Donald Trump. And that's not great in a state that it's voted against Trump 3 times in a row now.
Yeah, you don't want to be too Trumpy. Actually, on Election Day, I talked with Nicole Malliotakis, the sole Republican member of Congress representing New York, part of New York City. And she talked with great pride and great specificity. She was eager to talk about it, of the instances where Trump had taken steps that were going to hurt New York, where she got on the phone and called him and got him to sort of turn the policy around. She's very aware of what's going on.
Someone like her or a Mike Lawler would be a much stronger, I know we're talking about Mamdani, but would be a much stronger Republican nominee, looking ahead next year. But meanwhile, it'll be also interesting to see Mamdani's relationship with Hochul, which is now pretty decent. But eventually, he's going to want something that the governor isn't going to want to give him. And do they play nice in public, or we often see this with governors and mayors of the same party? There's tension and a split.
Yeah, we will see. Let's talk about the winners and losers who were not on the ballot. I will start by pointing out that Gregory Meeks, the congressman who was the chair of the Queens Democratic Organization, did not endorse Mamdani in the primary, did not endorse him even after he was the Democratic nominee. So he didn't endorse him even in the general election. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, well, he either is anticipating a challenge to his leadership or else he's just, I don't even know. I mean, why be the Democratic leader if you're not going to support your guy and he's now not going to take your phone call? This is the first Queens-born or Queens operating mayor, and the Queens Democratic leader did nothing for him.
And the Southeast Queens went for Mamdani. I was looking at the numbers like,
his home district, they're heart of his own congressional district.
So that's one. Exactly. The other losers, at least in New York, I would say, are Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. I'm not saying nationally. I understand Hakeem Jeffries wants to win the House and doesn't want to look like he's best friends with Mamdani, at least not now. Chuck Schumer, between concerns from Jewish voters and the same thing, trying to recapture the Senate next year, I get. But the problem is you also have to get elected. Yes. And I think there's a real possibility now that Chuck Schumer sees a primary when he's up. It's not for a couple of years, but he'll be up. Hakeem Jeffries will have a primary, it sounds like, as well. Now, maybe they swat away the primary challengers, but that's a real headache, as we all know, when you're trying to also take over the House and take over the Senate.
Well, yeah, and this is something that is worth talking about for a minute. The Democratic Party, when we talk about the Democrats or the National Democrats, there's no club, there's no organization that has a hierarchy and, he told me to do this, therefore I have to comply. It's really all of these competing power centers. So there are the billionaire donors, and they have a lot of clout. And not all of them, some of them are from Wall Street, some of them are from Silicon Valley, some of them are from Hollywood, some of them are from the industrial Midwest. They've got opinions, and, when they call Chuck Schumer, he's got to answer that phone. And if they're not thrilled about this socialist guy in New York City, that puts Chuck Schumer in a very difficult position.
Right, and you explained it really well, why he stayed on the fence. The billionaires who gave to the Independent Expenditure Committee, they're all losers. And then former Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who spent some money on this race, is also a loser as well. I don't think he cares.
Just wrote check after check after check.
I mean, you might as well put that money into a bucket and set it on fire. At a certain point, I was sort of amazed at how much money was being spent, and it just didn't feel like it was going anywhere. It's sort of like the end of the Afghanistan war, the Vietnam War. Like, why are you putting more resources into this losing cause? So they're losers as well. The political establishment that avoided Mamdani, they're losers as well. But again, loser today could be a winner tomorrow. But there's plenty to look at, and obviously Andrew Cuomo, the biggest loser of all.
Let's talk about some of the winners. I'd start with the Muslim Democratic Club. I remember them having me come and moderate one of their very first mayoral forums back in 2013. And they have been sort of on the march since then. They've been, backing candidates and acquiring some of the expertise. It takes a while to build out enough of an infrastructure where you have enough people who understand how an election works, from the details of election law, which are necessary to make sure you can get candidates on the ballot and keep them there, to fundraising, which has its own sort of, legal apparatus wrapped around it, as well as the technical side of asking people for money. You have to recruit candidates. You've got to train those candidates. You've got to see those candidates through after they lose. You got to pick up your pieces and keep going. And they have figured it out. It took them over a decade, but they have definitely figured it out.
I would say young people are winners. Usually people say young people don't vote. They voted in a way they haven't voted in a long time in New York City.
Define young, because you can move that.
I know. Is it under 50? Is it under 50?
Every year I move it up a little bit more.
I'm in my mid-50s. I'm like, oh, young people. But I guess that people under 40 or even under 30, I mean, I've seen more young people with Mamdani buttons. And obviously there's some young people who voted for Cuomo, but I think they're in the minority. And I do think that since the Vietnam War, Watergate, there has been so much cynicism, a lot of it justified, about politics, and the idea that young people are excited about politics. Like after World War II, that politics used to be a noble calling. And the fact that now it's almost a dirty word makes me kind of sad, because it could be a great thing. And it is nice to see young people excited about something. Listen, you can agree with Mamdani or not, but having increased civic participation, having this voter turnout, we're all winners because of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a cohort, and for lack of a better word, I guess I would term them the Occupy generation, where they're coming of age. They're either going into college or coming out of college, around the time of the Great Recession and the mortgage meltdown in 2008, of the ongoing effects of the Iraq War and the Afghanistan debacle, and then the rampant corruption that you see at the local level, all of which culminates with the election of Donald Trump. And at that point, they're like, you know what, all bets are off. And that's where what Professor Kang calls the Trump bump happens, where a lot of young people who had been at Occupy, who had been doing a little, things here and there, all came together and said, we've got to do something different. We've got to throw all of this out, because these Democrats that we see in the leadership are either complicit, or they're ineffective, or they're not speaking to our needs, or all of the above. And I think that is the sort of momentum that leads to the rise of a Mamdani.
I mean, for all of the many shortcomings of the Tammany machine that ran the Democratic Party in New York for decades, most of the time there'd be like a reformer who'd come in for 2 years and then lose. It was a party of inclusion. So they wanted to increase party membership. They wanted to bring people in. I'm going to give you a turkey. Come over to our clubhouse. And for the party to succeed now in 2025, it needs to do that. And for too long, like the Queen's machine was about excluding people. It's not your turn. Your AOC,
Sure.
Go away.
Sure.
And as opposed to, how can we channel this youth and energy? And that's what we're seeing when we see AOC win or Mamdani. It's not just that, they're far to the left. It's that they're young and they're filled with energy, and that has to be encouraged rather than shoved to the corner.
Okay, well, we are going to leave it there for now. It's been a really interesting season finale. In the TV business, I always think of this like a TV drama, right? So this was the season finale. We're going to have this transition, and then the season opener is on January 1st.
Yeah,
when he's sworn in.
It's going to be wild to see, and I don't know what to expect.
Me neither. Thanks so much for stopping by. It's been a long night, followed by a long day, followed by a brief season, and then the season opener. Thanks a whole lot, Bob.
Thank you.
Do you want more conversations with the people who are shaping the future of New York City and beyond? Check out our New York One podcast channel in the description. And hit subscribe to let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, elections, and issues.